All right, everything has been tested out, and I will wait until 30 seconds and I'll wait a minute and start talking. Ooh, wow, it's cold in here. Okay, we're coming up on a minute. Okay. All right, well, hello everyone. I am Leah Middleton, and you're watching Segment Fault Channel. I will try to be more relaxed and natural as ever, but there are things that I want to talk about, along with coding and stuff as well. But my channel, for those who have never uh, don't know what I normally do or what I normally talk about, for myself, in a way, I do like to speak off the top of my head. Um, I don't like recording because if I do, there's that stop and go, whatever. So I try to have more talks live. Um, I think that's where people can be more honest and not feel so rehearsed. Um, and that's typically what I tend to do on this channel, whether it's through Twitch or YouTube or Instagram or through Facebook. For a while, I did have a brief hiatus, well, brief hiatus, more like 2 to 3 years away. Um, a lot of that had to do with the job. But I'm now back here in America, and I wanted to continue doing, I wanted to continue my independent journalism career as a hobby to my normal job. My normal job, I'm a regular software developer, um, but it became very difficult to be a software developer overseas in places where internet wasn't either fast or always guaranteed. So Instagram was the best choice, and streaming was not, obviously because of bandwidth. But on this channel, I do like to talk a lot about politics and my views, and being a software developer, or um, I also do a lot of programming because I have my own hobbies that I like to do. And at this moment, I am working on a website of my own making outside of my own job, obviously. And it is for small landlords because during this time, I was, well, I didn't know I needed a problem solved until I became a landlord, bought a piece of property, but then had to go abroad. And that's when I realized I needed a better way to uh, maintain my property as well as keep track of expenses that come with having a piece of property. There were just a lot of things I didn't really think about that I didn't think that I would even need until I became a landlord and then had to go overseas. So that is a solution that I'm trying to work on now because I'm wondering how many other people are out there who might be in a very similar situation or their job took them abroad a lot more. And if they do have a piece of property back in the States, I'm pretty sure they will want something to help them with that, manage that. But anyways, now that I've talked all about that, um, I one of the reasons why I couldn't strictly keep my channel, coding channel, at least here on Twitch, is because I've noticed some things being a software developer. Um, which brings me to the first thing that we're going to talk about today. So my in my this is going to be really really hard because I think for a while people like me have been made to suppress how we truly feel out of our mainly because of our own dogma, and it has been used against us. And what I am in the world of computer science, being a software developer, I am surrounded by people who hate me, um, who have a difference of opinion than me, and just hate me simply because of that. As you can clearly tell, I have a whole bunch of tattoos, and I do still have piercings. I'm sorry if I do sweat, even though it is AC in here. I'm cold, I guess, talking about this, and makes me a little bit anxious, and my heart rate's a little up. But I am really cold in this room, but I really need to get this off my chest. Um, but anyways, going back to why I couldn't just keep this on Twitch at least, just a software channel. Um, as I've stated before, I'm constantly surrounded by people who hate me. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic about that, especially after seeing the reactions to Charlie Kirk's assassination. Um, and it does bother me because when I look at a lot of the video games, and I was a tomboy growing up. Okay, I was a huge tomboy growing up, but one thing that I noticed with all the video games that I didn't like, um, God was sinner. When you look at Assassin's Creed, um, clearly, clearly there, but it's based on it has biblical scriptures and stuff like that in it. Um, there are other video games too that have God that was that I would say God is a sinner, but it has the culture of Christianity in it. Um, so this is not to say that the creators themselves didn't hire people who were religious, who were non-religious to work on their projects. I mean, if I am a developer and I am a business owner and I want to get something off, I can't be prejudiced about, or I shouldn't be prejudiced or picky about who is doing the work, just as long as they have good work ethic and they are adequate and competent in what they do, right? That's the logical standpoint. And if you're a good boss and you see that, even if someone has a different of opinion than you're going to hire them. Um, so even though there might have been tunes of tones of Christianity in a lot of these in a lot of these video games, that isn't to say that every developer that was on the game development was a religious individual. With that being said, though, um, it seems like that industry has been co-opted. You can't. I feel like you can't even be proud to be Christian, or even announce it, or even like wear tattoos, or even wear a cross without someone already automatically thinking you are close-minded and a bigot, right? And it just blows my mind because like I've said before, when I look at the video games before, you had Christianity embedded in all of that, and these games were played by everyone. So obviously, that can't be true. This isn't to say that there aren't Christians who are very, how can I say this, in their dogma to the point where they can't even be holistic in their review about certain people without certain people, more like situations without compromising their own. And I believe because of our dogma, and we have we've stayed silent. Even in the workplace, we haven't advocated for ourselves. I have seen LGBTQ people advocate for themselves just for simple equality in the workplace, to be seen in the workplace, uh, to even as far in certain situations, asked to use the bathroom of the opposite sex. But yet, like if a Christian was to say anything, and I have been in this situation actually, I can talk about it now, but before I couldn't talk about it. But I had, I removed from this cheap. Anyways, I had, I can talk about it now, but before, I really couldn't because I worked for the company. But I did work for a company, with Boeing. It's actually Boeing in St. Louis. And it was one of the reasons why I decided myself to leave. And I ended up going to the Middle East, which I would talk about in a little bit. But I had experienced, I felt like I was being, I felt like I was being cornered and to just accept it regardless. And what I mean by this is we had an individual who did work, for us at Boeing who was a trans individual, and they're they wanted to use the bathroom. And I believe in the state of Missouri there is an actual statute that makes it illegal for the opposite sex to use the bathroom, of the opposite sex. So it was bewildering to me that we were allowing this. I had worked in a remote office of theirs, and it was not like that there. But on the main campus, it was. And I had brought it up to someone because it scared the crap out of me. I walk in the bathroom one day and see it. Well, apparently you know, this uneasiness of how I felt about the situation. Um, Well, I did receive a talking to. And when I received this talking to, I brought down the policy because eventually I had a problem with the policy that Boeing had, posted, but it was coming down from higher ups. Oh crap. I keep moving. Sorry. Hmm, I keep moving. I don't know why it's not auto focusing. I don't know. So I think it just focuses really slow. I don't know why. Come on, focus. Focus. There we go. All right, and I just need to stop moving. Stop moving. Um, Sorry about that. Going back to what I was talking about before. Um, Over 25. Okay, let's see. Open up our settings. I think we're good. All right, but anyways, all right. Okay, so I'll go back to what I was talking about before. So, what I was talking about before was when all that stuff had happened, um, with this individual, Well, it was a memo that came down from higher ups at Boeing. Like if you know anything related to DoD or anything related to um, companies that do DoD work, if there is a policy that's passed down from higher ups, meaning the administration, they post them on the board. So we all know, and we all can't say that we didn't know. So there was one policy that I had a problem with in particular, and it was an adjustment to protected groups, and they included gender identity with that. But with that, if there was, it pretty much said there if anyone discriminated or felt some prejudice against them, then they would be barred. Well, they will be terminated at Boeing, but they will also be barred from future employment with the government because of this. But then I wanted clarity on what do they mean by this? Do they mean prejudice or having a prejudice or having a discrimination? Does that also include just simply disagreeing that they should be able to use the girls' bathroom and all? Um, or if someone wants to advocate that they have a separate space, you know, for those who do feel uncomfortable in that and they want to do that for God knows what reason, I think we should have allowed a separate bathroom, or if we did have extra bathrooms on each floor, since there aren't that many, just designate one of the bathrooms, like one of the bathroom, like because they look like they were bathrooms you would see in on a campus, basically multiple stalls, like you would see going to a movie theater. So, but we had multiple ones on each floor, so any one of them could have been turned into a, a bathroom on all of the floors for those who happen to be of that typical, you know, that particular persuasion. But for some reason there was no trying to work around that. There was no workarounds of it. It was like they were trying to make females as uncomfortable as possible. So because of this, I ended up finding, I know it's crazy, because of something like this, and at the time this was happening in a lot of places in America, not and it wasn't just uh, designated to the fringes and privately held companies. They were trying to implement this bathroom thing everywhere. So, which kind of defeats the purpose to me. And I know I'm going on a rant, but like if like they even say it themselves, the population of those who are trans is extremely small, but yet they were trying to permeate throughout all societies to have this extra, you know, bathroom for them. And I'm like, logically, that makes no sense. If anything, it should be a case by case basis, city by city basis. But since there is such uh, a small group of these individuals, it seems like for such a small group of these individuals, they're demanding a lot of power. But anyways, going back um, to this, I ended up going out to the Middle East, you guys. Yeah, so I ended up going out to the Middle East. The one place, and why did I decide to do this? I know. The one place where I knew gender roles was like the cornerstone of their civilization, where they actually adhered to it in a more stringent way. I knew that I would not be able to have as much freedom to commingle with the opposite sex, which was fine. Um, uh, During that time, anyways, I was just more focused on work and building my stacks to pay off my student loan debt and come back to America as fast as I can. So, um, trying to find someone online, uh, well, that was like the last thing on my mind. Well, trying to find someone in the Middle East was like the last thing on my mind, even though there are expats there. But I knew there I wouldn't have to worry about men using women's bathroom. Um, but I know this all started about, you know, stringing from Christianity, but the reason why I told you all of that is because we're told to all the time be tolerant of others. We're always told to have compassion for others because that's what Jesus did. Jesus had for those who were not like him or unfortunate, right? Or just in general, right? But people also forget that Jesus also had boundaries and that he also um, wanted those people to accept accountability. Yes, Jesus said things like, and Charlie Kirk has made this very, like, he has made this, and I never really thought about it to continue when someone says this to me, to try to lecture me. Normally, it's mainly non-Christians or those who don't even practice the faith who would sit there and try to lecture me on things like this. They always tell me like, "Oh, well, you need to have compassion. Jesus didn't judge. Jesus let the woman who was a prostitute go, or like this person who was a sinner go. He like forgave them. Like he was out. He who is without sin cast the first stone. And I know that's what Jesus said, but for some reason they always leave the other part out, in which they turn to the person that was, literally at his mercy. He tells them to go sin no more. So not only does he save their lives, but he also tells others not to judge because they are not without fault. But he also tells us to take accountability. He also tells us to go sin no more, which means by default, us not sinning anymore means taking accountability for our actions. And I've noticed how the world, or in particular in this instance in America, the other side of the aisle, and even some of those on our own side, they always tell us to have compassion and be like Jesus. And what would Jesus do? But they never it's just a radical empathy, but there's no accountability. There's no telling the other person that there are steps in your life that you must take in order to not let this happen again. The way the world has been now, at least, and I think it's partly, well, at least in America, I think it's partly because it is our fault as Christians. We forgave those individuals. We told people not to judge. We told people to live their lives. But at the same time, we didn't even keep up on our end of the bargain by sticking to our boundaries, and also telling people to also be accountable for their actions. We were not accountable in our actions by stating that you need to hold yourself accountable. And by us not mentioning that, we were the ones who let um, society, in a way, in my opinion, like spiral out of control. We pretty much let the children run America, and the adults said nothing. Um, that's how I see all of this. And um, another way I can put this when it comes to tolerance, right? We're constantly told too that we aren't tolerant, but I am 39 years old, and my in my lifetime, I have seen sorry, this thing keeps like, maybe I need to just get a better camera. Okay, there we go. Sorry, it's blurry. But in my lifetime, I have seen, I can't believe I'm saying this. I have seen us go from Americans, majority of Americans, not being okay with homosexuality. And this is when we were a lot much more Christian back then. We were a lot more godly back then. We were a lot more godly back then, and Americans did not approve of homosexuality. And then Americans slowly started to be okay with homosexuality. Americans were not okay with those of the LGBTQ community adopting children. Eventually, that changed. Then the majority of Americans were not okay with homosexuals getting married. We believe that it was between a man and a woman. Even our own politicians did. Even as late as 2008, when 2006 when Barack was elected. Um, and then we went to gays now being okay to get married, to we just want to be able, like for the transgenders, right? They want to, help with that. To now let's trans the kids, and yet I'm only 39, and I constantly keep hearing in today's society that Christians are bigots and intolerant. Yet in my 39 years, I've seen everything that I told you happen. So are Christians bigot? And we're a lot less godly country now. So when the country was a lot more godly, we allowed these things. And the one thing I always hear about those who are a part of that community, um, my heart kind of goes out to them in a way, especially if they felt like the reason why they are the way they are is because they were treated very badly when they were in the church when they were younger. I'm sorry that you had to experience that. People who, how can I say this? People who did not accept you for who you were, they weren't Christians. We were at a point in our society where we were doing really bad things and we were supposedly Christian, like slavery, you know, being mean to people simply because they had a difference of opinion, simply because they had a different lifestyle than us. If you were a Christian, that means you're a follower of Jesus Christ. Jesus sat down with everybody. And I grew up in Florida. It's gay heaven down here. It was very normal to have friends who were gay when I was growing up in college. My very, 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 very first friend was gay. We just literally walked. He liked my jeans when I walked in the cafeteria. Did he know I was Christian? No. He just told me he liked my jeans, and I said thank you. And I said I liked his jeans because he was wearing holy jeans too. I didn't care I was gay. He didn't care I was Christian. He knew I went to church or at least had a Bible around, and um, I never did invite him to church because, well, I felt like in society they made it so bad that we couldn't even talk about it. So I never I never did, invite him to church because even at that time I didn't go to church, but I did sometimes read my Bible or I would be online reading something um, from a Bible source, right? But I always kept that stuff to myself. But these individuals, I mean, I did grow up in Florida. There was, how can I say, Tampa, Florida. We had like Gasparilla. There wasn't, I mean, we did have Pride Parade, but like it wasn't like how it was in Chicago when I went there for grad school. So like in Tampa, like um, back then their prides or their gay pride parades, they were a lot calmer. That therefore, as a person who saw that, it didn't really bother me because people were just expressing themselves, but it wasn't so lewd like it is now. You still have people wearing like you have what they were walking around with like your beach shorts and your wife beaters and your flip flops because that was just the attire anyways down here. Um, so there was no need to like get naked. You can go to the beach for that. So, but I saw that expression being expressed a lot in society. But in all my time, I never saw a Christian parade. I've never seen anything of that sort. Um, and what really kind of like opened my eyes to a lot of this is during all that time, I felt like I was like even though I knew I was in a Christian country, I felt like it was a facade. It was slowly growing into a facade, and people were, how can I say, they were turning based on what society thought was great, what society thought was in the social contagion, peer pressure, and that meant maybe becoming more secular, even if you are a Christian listening to more secular music in order to fit in. And that's what I did in order to try to blend in and stuff. But the more I did that, the more I let my own values kind of take the back seat. I just stayed quiet. Like I didn't. I tried not to violate those, but I did stay quiet. And I'm not gonna sit here and say I didn't sin or anything like that, right? Christians are sinners, just like they're humans, right? Where people think that just because we're Christian, that means we are without fault. It's so not true. So far from the truth, right? But we conceded the ground and standing up for ourselves, and we allowed a culture. I should say now it has turned into a religion. It used to just be a lifestyle. We have now turned this lifestyle into a religion, and now this religion is trying to dominate us and silence us, and tell us that we cannot stand up for ourselves. Tell us that we cannot even have our own places. Tell us that we cannot even have our own ideas and our way of life because if we don't include them, now we're considered bigots. We don't want to be a part. We want to have separate lives. Like let them have their life and let them have their lives and let us have our lives. We obviously don't agree with them. We can still be nice to them, but that doesn't mean that we have to. It doesn't mean that we have to be mean to each other. So, but I just keep seeing one side tell the other to be more tolerant, be more tolerant, be more tolerant, be more tolerant. But this side over here is not being tolerant to us. And matter of fact, when we put our foot down, and in this case, it was the whole girl bathroom thing, they push back at us and say, you're a bigot. Um, so it just kind of just tells me, it kind of has me asking, who really are the tolerant ones here? Because I remember even when I was aging out of, because I was in foster care for a little bit, but I aged out of foster care and I still had like a few classes to get over with. So instead of staying in high school, I went to an adult high school and just took the last 4 months and got like, sorry, pretty much read everything and collect everything to graduate sooner, right? Well, at this adult high school, Gary Adult High School, it's named something else now. Back then, I used to have an iPod. Yeah, it was an iPod. Yeah, because it was also I also had a Walkman, but at that particular time, I had the iPod because I really liked that thing. And I got to listen to multiple. I want my playlist, so the playlist that I had made on my iPod was a Christian one. So even though I had a lot of things happening to me during my teen years, especially with being in foster care. The only thing that kind of made me feel grounded was Christian music. It was a way for me to somehow keep hope alive and not feel sad because I was going through so many different emotions during that time. But my playlist was all Christian music. And I remember this girl pushing me down, and she had took my headphones off because she wanted to know what I was listening to. And I remember the laughter because I also had Yanni on there too. I remember the laughter. I remember being picked at. I remember being told you still listen to this. Um, and it made me sad. But that was back when I like because I graduated 2005. So that was back in 2005 that these people were just basically intolerant of me. And it's not like I was promoting anything. I looked like a regular, 18-year-old just happened to listen to Christian music. You can tell I was a Christian because I wore like I didn't dress like you would call quote unquote Christian, like completely conservative, girly. I was a tomboy, so I wore more baggier clothes. I didn't have any tattoos, but I wore more baggier clothes, and I always would wear a hat. But yeah, I remember that, and I come back when I hear today, especially since the death of Charlie Kirk, how people insist that we are bigots, blah blah blah, we are intolerant, and I just can't help but see how is that true. I can't see how that could possibly true when I look at um, how many things that we have let into society that is very anti-Christian in my 39 years. But we allowed it because we were being tolerant. And if we really want to go there, how someone choose to live their lives, that's not for me to decide. So I get tired of being told that I'm a bigot simply for having boundaries. Clearly, those who call me a bigot have boundaries because they don't like my opinions. So, therefore, I think it would be only, if you want to keep respect in society, you should reciprocate the fact that other people have boundaries and you should respect them. Um, but I'm glad people now these days are being more vocal about being a Christian and actually like pushing back. I think whenever now we have debates with individuals, we should push back, but we should push back in a way that Christ would, because believe it or not, just like Charlie, um, Jesus was killed for saying things, the truth, for calling people out, and for pushing back on individuals who wanted Christians to take a more, or I should say, they wanted society to take a more extreme approach. And Jesus had to remind us that we are not without sin. So um, I'm just glad that people are now standing against that, standing firm, but still being nice. There's nothing wrong with being nice. And I think honestly, um, if more Christians do that, I wouldn't say we would be a force to reckon with, but I think um, we probably wouldn't have so many. We wouldn't probably have polarization because, um, yeah, we wouldn't have this polarization if one side actually, stood up more. Um, I can't really say within the past 39 years that we've had more, right wing, extreme, stringent, highly disciplined, like religious focused theocracy, laws or behaviors that can be brought about in society, brought about through legislation. I haven't seen any far right legislation brought into America in my 39 years. I haven't seen anything that makes America more right, more Christian, nothing. Everything has trended towards making America less Christian. So it's like how can the laws, I mean, like, even when you look at things such as uh when you look at the only hard right thing, if you want to call that hard right, is immigration, which is another topic we're going to talk about later. But immigration would be the only, in my opinion, the only immigration, and anything that has to do with funding illegals is the most far right thing that I can possibly think of. But I don't even consider that as far right. That's what they classify it as, far right. But I think when you talk about the welfare of the nation, that also includes um, making sure illegals who knowingly break our laws, not asylum seekers, not refugee status, and not those claiming yeah, refugee status. And we're not talking about those claiming that falsely, but are in themselves truly economic migrants. Those people need to be distinguished, and we need to be firm on that. Um, when it comes to the welfare of a nation, funding anything or helping out anyone who is illegal, um, it is anti-American, hands down. And as a Christian, I am told to in the Bible that I should want, wherever nation I am in, I should want that nation to do good, because the welfare of the nation also, it directly correlates to my welfare in the country. So as a Christian, I should most definitely want the best for my country. But also as a Christian, how that country becomes the best, we hope, is through Christian values, by following how Jesus wanted us to treat others, including, like, even if we are a nation, right? Like, if we even if we were a Christian nation, um, that doesn't mean like like a lot of people, when they hear Christianity, they think of the Bible, but they don't think, like, how can I say this? I don't really think they think of the Bible. I actually think they think of people who say they are Christians, who say that they represent the Bible, who actually do not do a good job at that. Um, what I mean is the teachings of Jesus Christ, not the teachings of a man who claims to be a Christian, who then presides over the land, like the president or a mayor or an official bureaucrat, right? I'm not talking about those individuals. No, I'm talking about having your country live through Jesus Christ's values. Obviously, this is really hard to talk about, because people are going to interpret Jesus's words any way they want to in order to get their outcome. And for those who misinterpret his words, or misinterpret his words wrongly, they actually do more damage to society. And in my opinion, this is one of the reasons why we are where we are in society. But anyways, sorry. um, uh, Going back to the welfare of the nation, the reason why illegals in this instance are, in my opinion, um, no, I should wait on that. I should wait on that. But regardless, Christians have a duty to make sure their nation is well taken care of. Because their nation, when it's well taken care of, means that Christians are well taken care of. Just because we want our country well taken care of, it doesn't mean that we can't allow those fleeing refuge, fleeing for asylum. That doesn't mean that we can't make a way for them. And even then, those who come in, if we're Christian, we should try to help these individuals become like us, because it does tell us in the Bible to have them assimilate and be like us, meaning that yes, they can come as they are, but when it comes to the cohesion of a nation, because we all want to benefit from this nation, we all have to have somewhat aligned values, meaning respect, meaning, you know, people can say this value thing is, weird, but when it comes to a nation, having shared values is what makes up their culture. So this is the reason why if you have multiple cultures within a country, well, it can implode on itself. However, if there's one dogma keeping them all connected, um, how they may live their lives might be different, but at least their values with life, how they respect life, how they respect others, providing for others, if that's what they choose to do, like in the form of having a family or whatever. We want them to assimilate into the country, not bring in their old ways and not assimilate. So it doesn't mean you can't keep some of your dishes or your culture, but your values has to blend with ours. It has to coexist with ours. If not, then you have to change in order to live in America. It should be that way. And if I were to live in another country, which I have, I've lived in over 5 different continents. Of course, I've had to adjust. Didn't mean that I became a disingenuous person, or I wasn't true to my own culture. I know I still brought my culture over, my American culture. I dressed my American ways, but I still had to adhere to the laws and to the values and the culture and the customs of the country that I was in. There's something wrong with asking for that, and if those who cannot abide by that, they put in jeopardy the stabilization of such nation that Christians like us want, and therefore should not, be allowed. But that's my view on immigration, for this in the context of this conversation. But um, going back, sorry. I know I can go on for hours talking about things, and we're already being doing this for like 47 minutes. But as far as like Christians, I think we totally need to um, as Christians, I think we totally need to be prepared for certain things, stand our ground, um, be nice. So, if you are going to judge, you have to judge rightly, righteously. Um, Also, if someone were to tell you to, uh, like fighting and wars and stuff like that, and killing people and like violence, we'll just underline this with violence, right? And someone says that, um, or tries to imply that Christians have a motto that says turn the other cheek, and they're equating that to, oh, whether or not if we want to commit violence on you, it's okay. You cannot retaliate against us. That's how a lot of people interpret that. That's how a lot of people interpret that instructions Jesus gives us to turn the other cheek, give them your other cheek to slap too, right? But they forget, and a lot of the times it's probably because they didn't read the Bible and they aren't truly Christian, or they haven't gone out and understood the context of this. God gives us a body armor. Putting the armor of God, it is for defensive purposes, because God knows that you are going to be attacked. So armor, when Jesus told Peter, well, he told his disciples, I believe, to garnish a weapon or to carry a weapon if they did not have one. It wasn't because it wasn't because Jesus, wherever he was going, he was banking on these people being nice to him. No, um, Jesus do believe that or God do believe there are going to be times where we get attacked, but that doesn't mean that we should just turn the other cheeks. Also, in the form of attacks, just because someone asks you to turn yourself in, like for instance, when I think about Jesus in the garden and Peter and all the disciples there after Judas turned them in and they came to retrieve him, Peter decided to go cut off someone's ear, right? But Jesus told them to put it away. And I think it's because he knew they were coming from him. And instead of running away, um, he turned himself in because he was accused of something. And when you're being accused of something, you have to show up and, plead your case, and this is your way of being accountable. So someone coming up to you and asking you to turn yourself in or to come with them because they have questions, that is not an attack. What they mean by an attack in the Bible, it is very physical. Um, it's more of a defense. It's not to be an offensive thing. Um, Another thing in the Bible it tells us to do if people really believe that we should just be pacifists and let everyone walk all over us. God does command us to live with our neighbors and to love our neighbors and to be um, uh, try to compromise until you can't no more. So God obviously believes, and so does Jesus obviously believe that there comes a time in your life where you cannot compromise anymore. And in that case, if you cannot compromise anymore, you should leave. Jesus tells us that to cast our pearls before the swine. Don't waste your time on them. Okay, you should just leave. And only that only then when they say in the context of live amongst them as long as you can, or it could be anything. It could be just simply leaving, or let's say you try to leave and they come and try to like literally attack you and physically attack you. You at that point can stand up for yourself and defend yourself and believe by saying, "No weapon formed against me shall prosper." Okay. But with all that being said, I think a lot of Christians themselves, we have decided to pull back for the sake of just wanting to be included too. And in return, we have been trampled over, abused, taken having our kindness taken for our weakness. And I don't think that should stand anymore. But there's a polite way to do all of this. And with that being said, now I am going to go over into our reaction videos. And first, we're going to start off with Matt Walsh. I actually like Matt Walsh. He is a little bit more pessimistic than I don't know if he's pessimistic. Maybe he's more of a realist than Michael Knowles. I think Michael Knowles is more a polite version of Matt Walsh. And um, what happened to your Twitter account? Oh, my Twitter. Okay, so that Twitter account, it ended up getting suspended. And this was before Elon had bought it. So I ended up making a new account, but I ended up losing all my followers and I had to start all over. Um, it kind of sucks, but now that I have my account with now that Elon has bought it back, I all I can do is just really start all over. Um, I do. I was doing cybersecurity stuff. I did end up getting my I promise I'll do more. I will, I promise. But um, cybersecurity stuff. So I will tell you this. I got my Security Plus. I got my Network Plus, and I got my Azure Administrative Cert. So I will be doing some more stuff here. The next cert I actually want to actually take is the Azure Networking one because I really like networking stuff. I don't know why, I just do. But I will be doing that again. But today I was just doing mostly like politics stuff this weekend. I will be doing more IT stuff. Yeah, thank you. Another one I want to do too is Kubernetes. I find that really interesting. Um, but eventually, the older I get, I want to just become a site reliability engineer, just like an infrastructure engineer. I don't want to be doing too much coding unless it's my own projects. I'm at that point where I only want to code my own stuff. But I am going to now talk about, I'm going to go ahead and get into reaction videos. And if you stay, great. If not, Kubernetes is super fun. I love it. Oh, if you stay, great. If not, I can, whenever you come back and I'm doing a tech video, definitely come back in and, um, sit and chill for a while. But okay, I am going to go ahead and switch over to this. And we're going to talk about this guy. So before you do, can you link your new Twitter? Also, does this mean you're streaming more? Yes. Um, yeah, so with that, I, okay, because I really couldn't talk about that either. So I was in Kuwait, and then I was in Iraq, and then I was in Belgium. So I have been, uh, it's been hard in certain places where the internet wasn't all that great, but we did have Starlink. But then, I didn't want to really give away my positions in a lot of those places. So I was like, maybe I should like not, maybe I should not stream. The last thing I want is like alive when a bomb, drops off and we're running to the freaking bunkers. So um, it made my streaming very unpredictable because of that. But I will say Starlink is great. Yes, we used it out in the middle of nowhere in the desert. It was fast. I would definitely recommend it. All right, so we're going to talk about Mr. Well, this one is since we're talking about Christianity and how that has slid away. And a good example is this whole Pope and this climate justice thing. So, before I get to that, Mr. Frog, I don't know if you're a girl or boy, but Frog fanatic. I will be doing more streaming on the weekends and throughout the week. I think I'll probably do. I'll make a schedule, but Tuesdays, Thursday, no, Tuesdays, Monday evening, Tuesday evenings, and Wednesday evenings, I will code my own projects. Thursdays and Fridays, I'll probably do more socials. I did get a Zoom, and those who would like to call in or be a part and talk to me, they can. So Thursday and Friday are going to be those. Today I can't because I have a game to go to, and but starting next week, I'll do this a lot more. During the daytime, though, because I do work remote for now, I obviously can't show you my code, but just to stay accountable, I probably will play more stocks in the background because I do still actively trade as well. So there are certain trade channels I like to listen to the background. So if I need to make any adjustments, I can. But after my remote work session, then I'll do my own coding session and put that back up here. But anyways, let's go ahead and look at this uh, reaction. Let's go ahead and look at his commentary on the Pope's hosting the Cringe Climate Crisis event. Oh my God, I will comment on this, you guys. It was crazy, but let's. It kind of reminded me of a Christian non-denominational type ceremony. It was very weird, but let's go.
we are. After a 30-day stretch in which one of the most prominent Christians in
Can
the
you hear it
country
now?
was murdered in front of the entire world, prompting thousands of public celebrations, a murder that was bookended by mass shootings at two churches, one of which was targeted by a trans-identifying terrorist who explicitly despised Jesus Christ. You might hope that Christian leaders throughout the world and in all positions would be focused on that crisis. That's especially true since in Nigeria, Christians are currently being systematically slaughtered by Islamists in a genocide that's been ongoing for many years. This
Yeah, I actually talked about this. I had briefly made an Instagram post about this last year during Christmas time. And I only made that post because, ironically, this is going to sound crazy, but actually not really. Being in Iraq or just in the Middle East, I can't tell you how much closer I actually felt to God, even though there are this most majority Muslim country. The one reason why, like, it was normal to want to worship God or religion there, so it didn't seem weird if you became if you wanted to focus more on your inside on the inside and trying to be a better person and get closer to God. Um, that actually ironically was the place for me to do it in the middle of the war zone. But um yeah, I just wanted to say that.
would be the ideal time for the most important Christian leader, the leader of the Catholic Church, the Pope, to say something that might reassure Christians and Catholics and rally them, motivate them, those who are increasingly being targeted with violence because of their faith. Christians need moral guidance, have always needed it, need it now more than any other time in recent memory.
Monday.com, the opposite of any work platform we tried in the past. We tried other work management platforms, not naming names. They all
Maybe in history. But that's just not the approach that Pope Leo has decided to take. As we discussed the other day, he gave a profoundly bad answer when he was asked about Dick Durbin's Lifetime Achievement Award. First, the Pope stated that you're not pro-life if you support the death penalty, a position that contradicts Scripture, Catholic tradition, and any semblance of moral logic. He made it an equivalence between abortion, which is the execution of innocent children, and capital punishment, which is the execution of convicted murderers. He suggested that although Durbin supported and enabled the mass murder of children, overall, he had a pretty decent career, if you forget about all the baby killing. And then in the next breath, the Pope suggested that you're not really pro-life if you don't open the borders to hordes of illegal aliens from the third world. With respect, and as charitably as I can, I would say that these are the kinds of ideas that are very compelling to posters on Reddit. And I'm not
Okay, so with all that he just said, I've already gave a reason to why illegals should not be here and how we should not allow them to be here. There's a difference though between refugee and asylum, and in the Bible it does clearly tell us to help those who are seeking refugee and asylum, but it also tells us about liars and warns us about liars, and also warns us about people who enter your country who do not uh, who basically build enclaves into enclaves. Your country is no longer your own country. Those who invade your country, they will eventually take over your country. So yes, when the Pope wants illegals, not refugees, not asylum seekers, when he doesn't make this distinction and tries to group them all and classify them as migrants, he is going against the teachings of Jesus, and the teachings of God. It's very clear and simple about that. Now, when it comes to what did you say?
between abortion, which is the execution.
Okay, the abortion and the death penalty. Okay, so if you think and this is something my dad, he's a Catholic. All right, my surrogate father, he's a Catholic. I went to a Catholic school for a little bit before being homeschooled, but my dad does not believe in the death penalty either as a Catholic. he believed, but he is pro-life, in the sense that he does not believe in abortion. Um, he gives his reasons, and the Bible also has reasons too. And this is where I think the conflicts of that for me arises. There is, um, man, this is where nuances in the Bible comes, and this is something I think a lot of Christians probably would wrestle with. You have the an eye for an eye, right? But you also have turn the other cheek. You also have examples in the Bible in which those who, well, at least Jesus said it, those who live by the sword die by the sword. And I mean, if this right here, this one can be something that has to be wrestled with. But if I'm going to speak biblically about it, the situation, I think it is nuanced. I do think there is a difference between kill and murder. I do think there is a difference between killing a murderer and killing an innocent to be baby. I do not consider them the same. However, the only thing they do have in common is that they are alive. Redemption should be something people should seek, but does that also mean damn, this is hard for me. I think some people definitely should be redeemed who are criminals. Okay, even violent ones can be redeemed, but it's a threshold, and a lot has to do with that person, how far gone they are. And I think if you are someone who murders out of passion, you know, temporary insanity, I don't think in that sense, in that case, no matter what the reason is, love, hate, rage at the side of the moment, I don't think that those individuals should be put to death. I think they can be redeemed, especially if it's only their first time. And it was like the circumstances around it was because it was the motivating factor was passion. Okay. It wasn't thought, it wasn't premeditated. Now, if someone premeditates, that's different. In my opinion, I do think those individuals deserve a death penalty, and it has a lot to do with the thought process of what went into it, how methodical they were with taking away a life. It wasn't done out of callousness. It was deliberate. So for that reason, I have to go with the death penalty, and I know my surrogate pops would completely be against it. I do think those who kill out of passion, and it can be proven. Um, an example of this would be like someone, let's say you're someone in your family gets raped or murdered, right? Um, and you, as someone who's very strongly connected to that individual, when you find out, you just go on a rage. You don't care. You just grab anything. You're driving the car, and your whole intent is just to go and get that one person and do whatever. You don't care. I can understand that being passion. And I think any person who has an ounce of integrity would understand that too. If anything, they would try to, if they were being really honest with themselves and they were being, honest Christians about this, they would actually try to stop a person from doing that, committing that. But if they are not around and they automatically, this individual, did it and they couldn't, intervene, at that point, I think the only consequence that you can give to a person like that, based off of that circumstances, is you're probably gonna have to put them in jail. They're probably gonna have to face that consequence, and they should be able to redeem themselves when they get out. That's how I see it. If I'm going to be a Christian that way, if I had to think about what Jesus would do, I think that he would probably go with something along those lines, or try to stay as close biblically to the Bible as possible without um and that one is just really hard for me. But as far as like life with a baby, pro-life being a baby, for that, because they are innocent, how they were conceived has something to do with it. I do think it's wrong. So to equate those two things as being equal, um, and say that if you don't think a baby should die, but if someone is, but you believe in death penalty, that's what he goes on to say. Then you should question whether or not you are pro-life. He does not go into a nuance of it all or nothing. He just gives a blatant that like no life should be ended, and that's if he is a true Catholic, I do not believe he think that there are no consequences in the end. I don't like no. So you can continue to, when we talk about the death penalty, for those who don't believe in the death penalty, then you have to wrestle with whether or not you think that someone should be jailed for the rest of their life. Okay. And obviously people still have to pay for this person's jailment, and we don't incarceration. We don't know whether or not this person is going to um, learn from their ways, be a good model citizen in prison. And to be honest, like the way that prisons are built, I wouldn't be, it will take a real strong person to recognize the things that they've done and actually really want to change without just being a crazy, another person in the jail and just wrapping up even more charges. So you got to think about that too. There are some murderers who are just they are far from help. Like, like you can go put them inside of a prison and they'll still keep killing. So at that point, can they really be rehabilitated? I don't know. And if they can't, what should we do with them? So when that happens, um, that's when we go into this, crazy territory. But let's go back.
Of innocent children. Unfortunately for Catholics who would prefer to think of that moment as kind of a blip on the radar screen and not indicative of any deeper or more serious problem, we have now another Pope Leo moment that we need to discuss. He just appeared at the Vatican's latest international conference in Italy, which was entitled Raising Hope for Climate Justice. Now, already, just from the name of this event, you know this is going to be something extremely problematic, because the only people who use terms like climate justice and environmental justice, without exception, are communists who also prattle on about equity and unhoused folks and racial justice. This is language that, by design, identifies the speaker as a committed true believer of the left-wing cause, someone whose sole purpose is advancing leftist ideology. No Catholic, let alone a Catholic in a position of leadership, let alone the Pope, should be using or endorsing the idea of climate justice. It is a communist term. It is a term with deep and very bad political implications. There's no way around that. And indeed, the footage of this event bears that out. Now, you may have seen this viral moment from the conference in which the Pope blesses a block of ice to the delight of all the climate hippies in attendance. Let's watch that again. Here it is.
I would now like to invite you to stand for the blessing of the waters.
Lord of life, bless this water. May it awaken our hearts, cleanse our indifference, soothe our grief, and renew our hope through Christ our Lord.
We will raise hope by demanding that leaders act with courage, not delay. Will you join with us? Laudato si, mi Signore. Laudato si, mi Signore. Con tutte le tue.
Now, in a vacuum, there is, of course, nothing wrong with the Pope blessing something,
Yeah,
least of all water, or frozen water in this case.
yeah.
But the context makes this scene very troubling. Pope Leo,
I'm not gonna lie, that scene looks like something out of a pagan ritual. There is nothing wrong with blessing water. But the way, like that environment and how I see it, were they going to drink that? Were they going to melt that ice of water and then drink it? Or like how that ceremony was, it looked like it was some sort of, it looked like something you would do in a pagan ritual. That's what that whole entire thing looked like. Hmm. They said Lord of Light instead of just Father God. So I'm like, for me, it seemed very pagan in its sense. Um, but it's being masqueraded, or maybe the Pope doesn't see it like that, But from a distance, when I see this, and I am huge into like the the Vikings histories and the stuff that they have done in the past. Not to say that, just to, let's call it on the Norse pagan religion or anything like that, but when I just see this, it doesn't remind me of something I would see in a Christian ceremony. And if a pope of a certain faith is a part of it, I'm going to say of a certain faith, but if a pope of a certain faith that's supposed to not do this, I am going to have to question whether or not this scene looks very familiar to what Moses walked down and saw when people were just worshiping a gold calf. I look at this gold calf, this ice cube, as like this gold calf, and it just happens to revolve around the climate. The whole reason why they brought this there was it's a symbol for climate. It's not, so that's how I see this. But
as you saw, blesses a block of ice and then stands there while a bunch of communist weirdos do some kind of,
communist weirdo.
I don't know what that is, weird earth-worshipping hippie ritual. I mean, it's not a Catholic. There's nothing about that. It was not a Catholic. And this is one of the problems. I've had questions from people saying, well, what is this? Some kind of Catholic? Is this a Catholic?
No,
this is not. That's not. Nothing in there. It's not Catholic. That's not what that is. I've been going to Catholic Church for 39 years. I've never seen anything. I don't know what that is. I've never seen anything like that. And yes, your eyes weren't deceiving you. Arnold Schwarzenegger was there flapping the playground parachute around as the incantations got going. And we'll have more on Schwarzenegger's role in a moment. And for now, it needs to be said that, the leader of the Catholic Church just shouldn't be anywhere near this nonsense. It's not just cringe and embarrassing. It's scandalous to any non-Catholic who sees this and thinks that this event represents Catholicism in any way. It doesn't. The conference began with a speaker who stated that the event was, quote, directly connected to COP30, which is the UN climate summit. He also talks about the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, which was the theme of the event. Left-wing climate activism always has heavy undertones of, Gaia worship, which is just one of the reasons why Catholics should stay far away from it. And this event was kind of proves the point. Watch.
The way of peace, we're gonna rise up, rise up. We're a million different colors dancing to the beat. Rise up, rise up. We're a
I'm gonna let this play.
million voices singing as one. We choose peace. Oh, well, oh, well. Hey, choose peace. Oh, eh, oh, oh, eh, oh, oh, eh, oh, eh, oh. In the name of all people near and far, we stand with every child that suffers poverty and work as we choose the way of peace.
Now, on one level,
Okay, so when I look at this, and I have been to many different churches, whenever I try to find a church, I usually go to a whole bunch of different ones to see, to gauge the preacher, to gauge the worship. I want to know where not only their ideology is, but from what I've read in the Bible, I want to see how they interpret it. There's a lot of different interpretations of the Bible and the scriptures. A lot of preachers do it in context. A lot of preachers do it outside of context. But the one thing that I do like is when I have a church that use everyday scenarios to try to help us, and then use scriptures to try to help us navigate through certain circumstances, and how to treat people when these things happen, right? So I tend to want to go towards churches like that, and we have our Bible right there, and we read and we can ask questions if we want. But um, the one thing that is very common in all of them is the type of music. And I used to listen to a lot of Christian music. A lot of Christian music sounds exactly like this: peaceful, all together, no violence. It's very heartwarming. All it does, it makes you just want to smile. I've never, like before, I said before, I've never heard a Christian song that I didn't either cry or just laughed and smiled, right? Nothing ever made me angry. But um, it's the message that they like about Jesus, and I don't like how they're using our own mannerisms, our own worship techniques, um, and they have co-opted it and given it double speak. Um, but I have a feeling this hasn't. This has been I have a feeling though this sort of duality has been going on for quite a while. I was just sleeping to this. I think a lot of people were just sleeping to this, but it wouldn't surprise me, because I will say this too, it wouldn't surprise me with how everything is changing in society too, at least with the culture. It wouldn't surprise me if music started to sound more like worship music or go back to that, but have a different, it's like double speak in a way. It's nice and all good, but it's not based in Christian morality. But and I noticed they were doing this too on Christian songs. There will be certain artists who were not Christian, but because their songs had lyrics and values very compatible with ours, Christian radio stations would play it. So there are some secular artists out there who did sing really good feel good songs that a lot of Christian channels then use to stream, like cross stream, you know. Um, so I see a lot of that in this, and it wouldn't surprise me if people, even like Taylor Swift, were to change her tune to match very closely with something like that. But she'll probably still make it poppy, but it's to try to confuse. It's to try to confuse and conflate people. So this is a good Trojan horse for those. This right here is a good Trojan horse for those who then will turn around and lecture Christians that aren't you supposed to be peaceful? Aren't you supposed to be nice? Aren't you supposed to be this? But as I said before, they'll forget the other part, accountability. They will forget the other part to not do those bad things again. So this is just, in my opinion, it is a Trojan horse. They can never create. All they can do is take what someone else has done, take the mannerisms and the values and the the culture of something else that's very pleasing, that's appealing to a lot of people who want just peace, they will co-opt that and turn it and use it for their benefit. And all the while, the values that come with that system, they will negate it. They will refute it. And if you believe in that, they'll call you a bigot. So that's why I find it hilarious that they'll sing songs like this, but then at the same time call you a bigot for just having boundaries. So I've noticed that, and I think this is something that Christians should probably be aware of because, believe it or not, I think these people will start infiltrating the right, which they probably already have. But deep down, they're leftist, communist, pagans.
Well, you know, you see that and you almost want to laugh as you can't help it. It's just an absurd scene. It's just absurd. It's just absurd. Of all the other problems with it, like the Pope should not be partaking in something that is absurd. And that's what this is. And that's the most charitable way to describe it. And you see, you know, the various members of the audience checking their watches and staring blankly ahead while these middle-aged hippies declare that they want peace. You might wonder, what does peace have to do with the climate? And who cares if these random women want peace? And what exactly is the point of any of this? Who is this supposed to appeal to? Why is any of this happening? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? But really, it's not particularly funny, nor is it worth joking about. When Christians are being slaughtered, the appropriate response is not to host a dollar store Woodstock with the Pope. And yet, at no point did anyone at this conference demonstrate any interest in defending Catholic teaching or Catholics from the actual threats they're facing. Instead, speakers lined up one by one to insist that, you know, the weather is going to kill us or whatever. One of these speakers was, as we mentioned, the actor and former governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger. When he was done playing with the playground parachute, he took to the podium and delivered an address. And before we play his remarks, in case it's not obvious, Schwarzenegger should not have been invited to speak at this event. He should not be speaking on a stage with the Pope. I have no idea if he's a Catholic or not, but he did go on the record recently suggesting that heaven is a fantasy. So the odds aren't looking great that this is any kind of devout or observant Catholic. But more importantly, Schwarzenegger's intentions were very transparent. He sees Catholics as a very large demographic that he can co-opt en masse for his political environmentalist project. And he was very explicit about that, actually.
The reason I agree, Arnold Schwarzenegger should not have been invited, but he was invited because of name recognition. Name recognition that everybody in the world, including Christians, know. And what Christians tend to do, like how it tells us in the Bible, of course, you get really excited when someone wants to like turn their life over to Jesus, right? Yeah, you become part of the clan, but it's more like it's more like we're happy because you're choosing to try to follow Christ. Don't follow us. Don't follow what, no, just read your Bible and try to follow Christ. And yeah, we get really excited because then that means we have another person out there in the world who will try to do, who will try to be nice, who will try to, you know, uh, look at everyone holistically. Don't judge everyone. If you do judge someone, make sure you do it and it be a rightful judgment. It has to be a reason, not just just because you want to be a hypocrite. Um, like, so that's the reason why I feel get excited. I mean, even in the Bible, it tells us that, you know, uh, when one person decides to give their life over to God, like all of heaven rejoice. Okay. Um, when Jesus, if one sheep goes missing, um, like the shepherd will leave the 99 just to follow the one, so we get really excited when someone does want to turn their over life to Jesus Christ, but it's not because they're just joining the posse. No, we know that they're another, person out there who's going to put more good in the world and try to be nicer in the world and try to sin less. That's why we get happy about it. But in this instance, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, um, that's, he's there because he probably knows that Christians are, there will be some Christians who look at this and be like, oh, wow, Arnold Schwarzenegger's there. That means he must really fear God. Blah, 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 blah. All that's other stuff, but that's not the true reason why he's there. He's there for publicity. He's there to be an attraction to those who, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who happen to be Christians. This is a way for him to reach out and try to get them involved in the whole climate crisis thing. I don't see it as a crisis though. I see it as a made up sickness. Um, yeah.
Watch.
The Catholic Church has 1.4 billion members. 1.4 billion Catholics out there. 400,000 priests.
We have got to the point where literally anybody can build a fully working app without knowing how to code. This is
600,000 nuns. 200,000 churches. Now think about that. That power. And for that to be involved in our movement, in our environmental movement, to terminate pollution, to terminate.
So you want us to be a soldier for your Marxist, pagan, hippie, idolatry, Woodstock organization that is fraud, that's anti-human, and you only look at us because of our sheer numbers? You actually don't look at us as, he just looks at us like if I had to think of a battlefield, if I had to think of a battle and I want to make allies, it's not because I want unity, it's because I want to fight war. And he wants us to be on the side of climate justice, or I should say, Catholics, on the side of this climate justice fiasco. I call it a farce that's driven by Marxism, which is anti-American. It's not anti-American, anti-human. Communism is anti-American, anti-human, and this is his way of showing how he wants to use us. He doesn't actually respect us. He wants to use Catholics for their agenda. This is something that businesses do when they are trying to find a new block of consumers. You are just a spread number on their spreadsheet. They actually don't care. They just care about the bottom line, and in this case, the bottom line is carbon net zero, depopulation, replacing food sources with substitutes, and the world being completely okay with that. This also includes the whole animal thing. Let's be clear about that. With this whole climate thing, that also means wanting to get rid of cows, or blaming cows for certain things so that we don't use them or we don't eat them. The same thing with chickens and all that other stuff. But how I know that's unbiblical. In the Bible, God gives us command over the animals. He gives command. He literally gives us commands over the animals. We sacrifice. They used to sacrifice some of the animals too back then, but we also, when giving command of these animals, we use them to feed ourselves too and nourish ourselves too. This goes against that. Everything that the climate justice thing is about, it goes against that. And what the end result is to put people in small. In my opinion, I think climate crisis thing is an attempt to put the whole population in a more dense area that you can easily control. That's what I think. but it's done under the guise of protecting the environment. Most conservatives I know who love to be outdoors, especially, you know, with, if they want to be closer to God or anything like that, Jesus went out into the woods. Jesus went out into the wilderness. We actually do like the wilderness. We do like the environment. It's our one place that we can go to and marvel at God's creation. Why would we want to destroy it? It goes against everything that we believe in. So this is not an attempt to actually hear us out. They probably don't even think that we are environmentalists. But the way that they look at us with this particular thing, they want us to be environmentalists the way that they want us to be environmentalists, not the way that we want to be environmentalists. But anyways, let's continue.
Pollution. And of course, I'm very honored to be here because I'm next to an action hero. Now you're laughing because he doesn't look maybe like one, like you see in the movies with the muscles and with the guns and all that stuff. No. But the reason why I call him an action hero is because as soon as he became the Pope, he ordered the Vatican to put solar panels on top of the buildings. Think about that.
Wow.
Now, one thing you'll notice.
That is the most superficial thing because he decided to be a consumer to put solar panels on the Vatican. That made him a superhero. Not, I don't know, possibly bringing more people into being followers of Christ. That probably would make him a superhero, in my opinion, because I would hope by people following Christ, they wouldn't want to commit a whole bunch of sin anymore, and which would in turn make society better, right? That would be a superhero, but no, because he became a consumer to put solar panels on the Vatican.
About the speech is that Arnold has a tendency to say, think about that, right after he says something that you absolutely unequivocally do not need to think about. You know, the idea that the Pope is a hero because he had solar panels installed at the Vatican
Thank you.
is one of those lines that no one should ever think about ever again in any context. But the earlier part of Schwarzenegger's speech, the one where he says that, he wants every Catholic in the world to join his environmental movement, is the bigger tell. It's pretty clear that to him, the most exciting thing is the size of the Catholic Church, not its teachings, but its size. That's the key asset. And he wants to take advantage of that asset for his own manipulative and cynical and political reasons.
I agree.
What made this whole event so galling, one of the things that made it galling anyway, is just how rote and predictable it was in many respects. They're all channeling the same language that Greta Thunberg was using 5 years ago before she decided that Gaza was more important than climate change. And it's obvious why she made that decision, by the way. After all, it's pretty hard to talk about how the world's going to end in 5 years for your entire career. Sooner or later, people start to realize that, the world is still around. If Greta accomplished anything, it's making clear that when leftists talk about climate justice, they're not really talking about the climate. They're talking, again, about communism. They're talking about destroying the West and eradicating all of these supposedly oppressive institutions, including the family and the church. This is from an article that Greta Thunberg wrote just a few years ago. Quote,
all right, so that's one pair of glasses with prescription lenses, plus anti-reflective lens coating.
School children, young people, and adults all over the world will stand together demanding that our leaders take action, not because we want them to, but because the science demands it. That action must be powerful and wide-ranging. After all, the climate crisis is not just about the environment. It is a crisis of human rights, of justice, and of political will. Colonial, racist, and patriarchal systems of oppression have created and fueled it. We need to dismantle them all. Our political leaders can no longer shirk their responsibilities.
Well, boner pull. Speaking about camping, something about me. I don't know, because it's like it has been a while since I've gone off of doing streaming for a while. And this is how I know now all capitalists are just evil, evil people. sometimes I guess this can be a little bit shameful to say too, I guess, depending on how you look at it. Um, so my last 2 quarters in grad school, I lived out of my car, and I would actually, and I was, a computer science person, but I could finish all my classes online. But I lived out of my car because I did like van living for the last 2 semesters all around the U.S. and particularly going more towards the West. I had never been in California. Well, I had been in California a long time ago when I was 18, and I never went back. And I went to see, more of it. So I went up the coast and everything. But I then eventually graduated and I ended up buying a house. And even after buying a house, um, I still ended up living out of my car and going I ended up going to live in St. Louis for a while, lived out of my car there, went camping, did a lot of my work on top of hills. I had to use my phone and do like tethering, but being a software developer, I can literally do anything. Um, so I saw not so long ago too on X, there was this one person who posted and Elon had liked it, but I thought that was amazing. They had went on top of some mountain, some hill somewhere with their Starlink there, and it was like overlooking a lake, and they were up there coding. And yeah, the caption of that photo was with Starlink, you can code anywhere, and they're right. If that's the one thing I actually did like being a remote worker while I was coding. There, like California too is one of my favorite places to go to. Tennessee as well. There are so many beautiful places that have never. It doesn't seem like they get touched much by humans, and like there are times where I would just rather want to pitch up a tent instead of just wanting to build a house there, and be completely perfectly fine with living in a tent and bringing all my toiletries. I can't wash myself in certain areas because that could the soap can be harsh on the environment, so I have to go somewhere else. So I was very cautious to not want to leave my trash around, to not want to pollute more, but still enjoy the environment. And I think it's wild because when I go to a lot of these liberal cities, there's trash everywhere. And it begs the question to say here and say, are you guys sure you're environmentalists? And are you sure you're doing your part to not pollute? Um, but that's just something I thought was just always interesting about these climate justice things.
Now, this is what the left means when they say climate justice. This is what it always means. It never means, and can never mean, anything else. They want to dismantle everything. It's why they oppose, nuclear power, even though it would eliminate all of their concerns about greenhouse gases while providing affordable energy to tens of millions of people who desperately need it. Leftists seek to dismantle Western civilization. Every single one of their pet projects, from racial justice to climate justice to immigration justice to homeless justice to employment justice, and anything that they attach the word justice to, are merely different fronts in this battle, different
It's beautiful.
vehicles towards the same objective.
I didn't really Alabama. I've only been to Mobile, Alabama, and because that's when I was stationed in Louisiana at Fort Polk. And Mobile, Alabama, it was so flat. The one place I actually found really beautiful to drive through was actually Mississippi. You get to see all the different deltas. Um, that was actually really beautiful to drive through. I don't think a lot of people give that much appreciation either. Alabama, being from Florida, Alabama, yeah. Oh man.
Climate justice is an inherently left-wing political concept. It comes bundled with every other leftist project. That's the point, which is why, for example, if you go to speaking of the UN, they're working in cooperation with the UN for this event. Well, if you go to the website for UN Women, you'll be told this: feminist climate justice brings a gender lens to the fight against climate change, acknowledging how the drivers of the climate crisis are also the drivers of gender inequalities. While women and girls experience disproportionate impacts from climate change at the global level, the effects are not uniform. Looking at climate change through the lens of intersectional feminism, meaning the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other, it is clear that climate change risks are acute for Indigenous, Afro-descendant women and girls, older women, LGBTQ plus people, women and girls with disabilities, migrant women, and those living in rural, remote, conflict, and disaster-prone areas.
How could this possibly be true when men have been ruling this whole entire planet for God knows how many eons, and yet there are still countless forests out there. There are still countless caves that have even been navigated through. There are countless areas in the world that are still left untouched. And even if we want to go to those areas that have been untouched, where I am pretty sure the government in charge will be the men, like those, there's like this one island in the Pacific where it's mostly indigenous people. They've never been like modernized in any way, shape, or form, and they're like off limits. I'm pretty sure the natives there have men in charge, and that island hasn't fallen apart. There's still lots of woods, there's still lots of fish, and you know how I know this? They have been thriving on that island for God knows how many freaking centuries now. So yeah, the no contract tribes, yes. So it's like when I hear things like this, like it is utterly ridiculous to sit here and talk about looking at climate and the environment through a gender lens, as if men running things for the god, like how they have been running things, like it has, like listening to this, you would think this whole entire planet was destroyed. It's going to be destroyed. That's literally what this is making it seem like, and it's only women who can possibly, feminizing the whole thing. It's going to make it better. I wonder how that would apply to the no contact tribe, who I'm pretty sure, like I've said before, their whole entire government, their whole entire clan is probably ran by men. But okay.
If you're invisible in everyday life, your needs will not be thought of, let alone be addressed in a crisis situation, says Matcha Fornin, a lesbian feminist human rights defender who works to empower stateless and landless Indigenous women, girls, and young LGBTQI plus people in Thailand's Chiang Mai, Hong Son, and Tak provinces. Humanitarian programs tend to be heteronormative and can reinforce the patriarchal structure of society if they do not take into account sexual and gender diversity, she explains. Now, if you go to the website for Greenpeace,
Because sexual and gender diversity care matters to trees. Yes. The sexual identity of humans matters to trees. This propaganda actually works on people. It must be an emotional, like, tug. It has to be an emotional tug, because what I just mentioned with the whole contract tribe, if you were to actually sit across someone who actually believes this and then give them this scenario, um, I don't see how they can just I don't see how they can sit here and still say that island, which I believe is ran by men, with some female leadership in there. That island is on the verge of collapse, or on the verge of being succumbed by the waters, completely submerged by the waters because of whatever the hell they're doing on that piece of land. So it's like, if you have any sense of integrity, you would know what you're listening to is horseshit. It has to be. So in a way too, because of how it's so hyper focused on feminism and females, that propaganda seems more like a cry for women to want to gain power, or to like exercise emotional manipulation to gain power, because it seems to only revolve around females there. They already make the men in op that op-ed, they already made men the enemy. So it's like, I don't know. I think that's just wrong.
You'll be told this. We at Greenpeace are often asked, why is an environmental organization talking about LGBTQIA2S plus issues? What does queer justice have to do with climate change? Why don't you stay in your environmental lane? Because the fight for environmental justice cannot be achieved without the fight for LGBTQIA2S plus rights and the fight for social and racial justice and gender equality. As we tackle the crisis of climate change, pollution, and loss of biodiversity, we must also address social issues and inequality and discrimination. There's no justice if there is no liberation for all.
But see, even in this, how is the connection between who and what I sleep with? How is that in any way, shape, or form connected to telling people to stop polluting, pick up their trash, buy glass instead of plastic? Like, I'm confused.
All marginalized communities suffer the most in the climate crisis and during times of disasters. Further, marginalized groups within the diverse LGBTQIA2S plus community, especially people of color and low-income communities, experience even greater impacts of climate and environmental injustice.
Yeah.
Okay, I could go on.
I would agree.
The point is that this is a package deal. Climate justice comes with LGBT, feminism, bring down the patriarchy, all the rest of it. It has always been this way. This is what the climate justice movement has always been since its inception, since day one. At its core, there is no Catholic version of it.
I think though with the whole rage bait too, I don't think it used to be this way. I think the only reason why news these days are more rage bait is because people who have had certain boundaries and had stayed loyal to those boundaries, they started to not enforce those boundaries. And in return, the other side just kept picking, 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 kept picking. And anytime they kept picking, they kept going, they kept provoking things that they know go against our values. And in return, we retaliate by we don't really like, well, I guess in our version of retaliating, it's just putting up that boundary and saying no. So when you have people doing this all the time and then purposely, like it's like purposely, like, let's say someone doesn't like I wish I was allergic to sin. That would be amazing. But let's say I was trying to not sin and I was a recovering alcoholic, right? Um, you can have people who come over, these people who are supposedly your friends or someone who's trying to help you, right? Get over this addiction, or at least try to stay on track so you don't go fall back into that addiction, right? You'll have some of these people who claim to want to be your friend to help you, but they introduce little things into your life that could lead you back down that road to alcohol. It starts off really small, but they keep picking, pushing you closer and closer and closer to you going back towards that. And if you decide to say no, I don't want to do this. If you have a friend who then says, "Oh, you're not going to slip in, you're not going to fall into that. It's okay," um, and they don't accept that, accept your boundary, and still decide to hang out with these people, and they keep saying, "Oh, just this time, oh, just this time," or just they just keep bringing things around you that you have told them to countless times not to bring around, that is connected to alcohol or can be lead you to alcohol. These people are. This is how I see this whole thing too. This whole like climate thing. These people don't know when to stop. So, like, even most of the time with rage bait and the news, like, it's not informative anymore. It's more telling people that things are starting to happening. It seems like things have been happening and implemented without consensus of society, mainly by bureaucrats and our politicians. And then once society or society learns about it from their local leaders, and they want to push back on it, these individuals then say, "Oh, well, you're not being tolerant, you're not being open." That's how I see it as. They just, like, you set a boundary and then they enact something that goes against your values. And when you say, "Hey, I thought we were trying to be more cordial with each other," they will then call you a bigot, blah blah blah, but still keep whatever they put in place that went against, that didn't have support from society. It didn't have support from your own community. It's just something your local leaders put in place. But and since they voted on it, and since you voted them in, well, we're not going to take it back. So that law now stays in place, moving us closer and closer, and encroaching on other people's boundaries, or I should say, societal boundaries. And then they implement another rule. They implement another rule. They implement another rule, and then that's how I see rage bait as now these days. And the counter is just, "Hey, I'm going to start standing up for myself, and if you don't like it, then um, um, if you don't like it, then I don't know, kick rocks," and the other side's going to get upset about it. So it's not because the news is trying to inform you about certain things, in order for you to go down to your local government and stop it. No, a lot of the times we are at this point now where our officials just come together to make something. Like, for instance, with the boy girls thing, the society didn't agree upon that. Our politicians did. And our politicians knew that certain people in society were going to have a problem with it, but they did it anyways. So, with that, that's what I mean. You have a side that just keeps poking and doing things that no one asked for. And when you do that, the other side is going to retaliate. And when that other side retaliates, it's to get us somewhat back to normal, back to center, because you just have one side poking and poking and poking, expecting the other side not to do anything. And then by the time the other side finally does do something, you guys get upset about it, or the other side get upset about it when I call them bigots. And then now we have what we have today right now. So, in my opinion, that's how it's been. And then if I could go into the history of America, which I will do a different time, this has been a pattern. It has been a pattern. One side always takes longer to respond after the other side has been for years, sometimes even decades, doing stuff to illiterally irritate and bring us closer and closer to either war with each other. And a lot of the time, it has to do with growing the government. Anytime the government wants to grow, or you have a side wanting the government to grow, this is when you have problems like this. And that's because of the polarization. So I'm like, that's just something I've noticed. One side picks all the time, and the other side takes forever to finally react. But when they react, it is massive. Things change drastically, and then you have a period of calmness for about 20 years. And then after that, during those 20 years, though, that other side, they will slowly start coming back to picking at you until eventually we get back to that same position where usually the right has to come back and realign things. And unfortunately, that's where we're at here in America when it comes to the news, at least.
And that's why Christians, especially Christian leaders, shouldn't be anywhere near it. Nowhere near it. Now, that's not to say that Christians shouldn't love God's creation and seek to preserve and protect it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Of course, everyone can agree with that. Which is, by the way, one of the reasons why we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. If we're just talking about loving, God's creation, protecting the earth and those sorts of things, protecting nature, everyone agrees with that. Yeah. Like, we don't need to, especially amid everything happening in the world right now, we don't need to spend time on that. We just don't need to. But the climate justice movement is a left-wing political movement again, and its goals very explicitly are the destruction of Western civilization, starting with the church itself. You don't have to take my word for it. Ask them. Go up to any leftist who's going on about climate justice. Ask them how they feel about the church. Ask them how they feel about the family.
I mean, we don't really have to. We already know how they feel about the family. We know how a lot of them, and I should preface this when I say the left. It's more like the ones who push this hardcore. We already know that they don't like us based off of what happened with Charlie Kirk. You did see a lot of people on that side who didn't even know such evilness even existed on their side, um, and distanced themselves. I noticed that side. I noticed that poison in that side for a very long time. Um, and that's the part. And I should have been more. I should have been more careful with this. Um, but I was naming it left when I should have been calling them progressives. But when you see even your mainstream leftists, your liberals, um, supporting this and not really pushing back, it kind of makes it seem as if the whole entire party is in agreement. Or you guys are just so scared, or maybe you guys don't want to rock the boat. You just didn't know how crazy the progressives really were. And usually that is what happens when there are new groups that come in, or they just want to be accepted. You don't really know who they truly are and what their true ideology is until there are more of them in that group. And once they are the majority or they are larger in numbers, they try to reshape the identity of the party. That's I mean, you can even say this about just countries and demographics and the way of life. This is how, countries in the Middle East have turned from Christian to Muslim. This is how you have in certain areas, like in Europe, where uh, I'll keep it in America. You have places like in Dearborn, not Hamtramck, Dearborn, Michigan, where now some people, like the Muslim mayor, he feels that it's okay, since they are now the majority, to try to change the culture and not abide by what's there, because now they're the majority. Now they want to play, their calls to prayer at 5, violating noise ordinance. So this whole like like I don't even know if it's a cancer, if you would call it a cancer, but that idea where you have these individuals with like the liberal party, the leftists here, they are the ones that have that are the evil ones. Like on the right, you have like your far right dogma, strict, you like a purity test type Christian type, those types of people on the right. Those are evil too. And to be honest, those, if you have to, if you have to think about the Sadducees and the Pharisees and like Jesus, he wasn't one of those who was strict dogma. He wasn't one of those, and he actually warned us about those who are like that. And on the right, when you have individuals who use Christianity as a purity test, I'm sorry, you're not a Christian, because Christians are not pure. Christians are sinners. So if you think that, like if you're one of those, then you're not truly. If you're one of those, and I even hate saying this, because who am I to tell you whether or not you're a Christian? But I can say that you're not acting like you're supposed to, based off of Christian values. If you do those things, but um, anyways, I got sidetracked there. But I'm gonna go back to this.
And if the Pope is going to gather a bunch of climate justice activists together in a room, it should be to rebuke them for being anti-human communists.
Anti-human communists.
That's the kind of leadership we need. And it's the kind of leadership we must demand. Now let's get to our 5 headlines.
Okay, so enough of Matt for today. Okay, now this other one. Now let's talk about this legal situation and then the Don Lemon one, because I was also a veteran, and when I hear what's happening and the service now under Pete Hegseth, it actually does make me a little bit more excited. to see this, especially after being in Iraq and Kuwait for the past 2.5 years. Well, Iraq, Kuwait, and Belgium for the past 3 years. Um, uh, I saw how even the uniform, how soldiers dress, how soldiers act, how soldiers walked, how soldiers even carried themselves was very different than when I was in. And I got out completely 2016, but I was in for 10 years. I joined when I was in 2005, and I can tell you that in my time, even before I got out, the military was relaxing, and that was a shock to me because, like when you go through torture and basic training and stuff, it's not even I don't consider it torture. I knew what I was getting into because I always wanted to join the military, but before I knew what I was getting to before I joined the military, so I was expecting that. But it kind of threw me off a little bit um, when I started noticing certain things were changing while I was in the service, and I didn't think that it was for the better. It wasn't because I didn't want these new recruits to suffer. It was more along the lines of instilling discipline and the Army values into every soldier. So actually, let me do that one first, since this one is very dear to me. This one is very dear to me as far as like military. Uh, anyways, okay, let's
A few months ago, I was at the White House when President Trump announced his Liberation Day for America's trade policy. It was a landmark day. Well, today is another Liberation Day. The liberation of America's warriors, in name, in deed, and in authorities. You kill people and break things for a living.
Yes.
You are not politically correct.
Nope.
And don't necessarily belong always in polite society.
Yes, that's very true.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing a series of changes for the military personnel that he says will raise the standards of combat troops and free commanders from the fear of violating internal military rules.
You may remember Secretary Hegseth called hundreds of the nation's highest-ranking military leaders back to Quantico last week to speak to them, but it went a different direction than most probably expected. A large part of Hegseth's speech was dedicated to prioritizing physical fitness and, well, being well-groomed, even if that meant fewer women in combat roles.
If the Secretary of War can do regular, hard PT, so can every member of our joint force. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon. No more beards, long hair, superficial individual expression. We're going to cut our hair, shave our beards, and adhere to standards. Because it's like the broken windows theory of policing. It's like when you let the small stuff go, the big stuff eventually goes.
Yes.
When it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it.
I agree. And I'm going to tell you why.
For over 17 years, I thought that I had a problem with this, but I actually didn't.
Okay, before we listen to people who have never served, who have never been in the military, I was in the military before all this crazy stuff. Before all the craziness in it, I was there. I was basically in 2005. I did not sign up because of 9/11. I signed up because I always wanted to join the military since I was a kid. My father was in the military as well. Not to mention I was very athletic. I did JROTC in high school, did ROTC a little bit in college before I decided to make that decision to join reserves and then go full time. I knew the game already, and because I grew up in a very strict Christian home, and I was homeschooled, following orders, and well, I knew my parents would never do anything to me that would abuse me, that would hurt me. I might not have not understood why they were doing it. I wasn't old enough to understand why, but I knew that my parents were always feeding me, always there for me, always looking out for me. So I followed their rules. But they also instilled in me that if someone tells you to do something that isn't right, you stand up for yourself. So I joined the military because I did need discipline. As far like I needed a plan. I needed discipline. I did try college for a year, and I didn't know where I wanted to be. I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but then I realized after taking my first law class that wasn't me. Like I don't mind debating or whatever, but um, I don't know why. I don't know why, but I just didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. So I joined the service. I looked forward to the craziness of basic training. I couldn't wait for that. I couldn't wait for the yelling, wait for I grew up with those the Full Metal Jacket movies and the Major Pain where you get, that hand in your face like this. Yeah, when your sergeant do that, you know what time it is. Um, I was used to the whole they're gonna yell at me and I'm gonna have to beat my face. Like I went in there with that mentality already, and I was gung ho for it. I and then because of course I was a tomboy, and I was athletic. I never shot a gun before, but I couldn't wait because volunteer guns we would try in basic training. Grenade launchers, freaking throwing a grenade. Oh my god, it was like the best thing a tomboy could possibly dream of, and I wanted to be a sniper, but my dreams were shot down when I realized that being a sniper was a designation, and you first had to go to ranger school or some sort of combat. So you had to be some sort of combat role in order to get that designation. And go to the school. So you would have had to pass some sort of combat MOS training. You can reclass later to like tech, but you have had to have first passed or MOS qualified in a combat role, and then you can go to sniper school. I didn't know any of that. Okay, so my dreams were completely crushed. And at that time, there was no option for combat roles for females. The only thing they had that was somewhat similar, if you wanted to go out in the field and be that way, was either a medic or an MP and truck drivers. But I was an IT person, and I didn't want to be an MP. I didn't want to be a truck driver, and I, for sure enough, was not going to be a medic. So I just like the sight of blood, the smell of blood, just like for me. But anyways, with that being said, shooting a gun, that was fun. That was something I felt like I could do. So when I joined the service, I think mainly because of what I saw on TV, I knew there was certain decorum to that you would have to uphold and adhere to. I felt like integrity was a cornerstone of it. Like they expected their soldiers to be truthful, be where they needed to be squared away, complete your PT test, pass your PT test, qualify, and everything will be good. Be at the right place at the right time. If you're too early, you're late. No, no. If you're on time, you're late. If you're early, you're on time. So like stuff like that. It was a very strict regimen, and I needed that. I needed that. Um, even though I was introvert and I already had like a schedule, I felt like I still needed that early in my 20s. So I was prepared for that. But then slowly, as I was in the military, and I got into my actual unit, I started noticing first with reservists. And it always would weird me out because they would come and do trainings with us when we were at JRTC in Fort Polk, and you had a lot of reservists overweight. But it made sense because they didn't work out every day. Their working out routine was left to them. They had to be responsible for it. But for soldiers who are active duty, we woke up every day. Had to be information 6:30 to 6:30 to 7:30. That's PT time, baby. So for us, it was completely abnormal to find someone who was training with us in a reserve unit who was fat. Like, you're still in? Like, isn't there like a tape test that you're supposed to pass? So a tape test is when if you're too fat, I shouldn't say that. Let's say you have the right BMI, right? But you're muscular and you have more mass, but your BMI is low. You're just a big person, pure muscle, and because of that, you can't meet your weight. Well, if you can't meet your weight because you're just a big guy, you're full of muscle, or a big woman, you're just full of muscle. you have a body fat test test that they can take to see if you're in good shape, and that's your BMI take test. So if your BMI is too high and you still can't, pass the weigh-in, then you are considered overweight, and they'll put you on some sort of routine to make you lose weight. That's how the regulation was when I was in. And you had so many times to pass your PT test, or you would get discharged. You could not be one of those individuals who can only who couldn't even pass their PT test 3 times in a row and expect to stay in. That was just not a thing. But I started to also notice too that if you went to basic training and you were stressed, you were given like stress cards. That was not a thing when I was in. You were expected to get yelled at, and we were not allowed to have phones and basic training. When you went to your MOSQ, well, MOST, your first training when you get it when you come into the military, you were not allowed to have a card. You could have a phone, but if your training had to be like a certain amount of time long, like in length. If it was like I think 4 months or longer, you can have a card. But if it was less than that, and most trainings would be like 8 weeks to 10 weeks or 12 weeks on top of your basic training, those during that time they won't let you have a card. But it baffled me that individuals who just finished basic training were able to then use your cards for your MOST. And on top of, I mean, you could use your phone, but as far as like your first MOS and your MOST, you could not have a card unless your training was so long. We had to wear our hair in a bun, slicked back, and for neatness and appearance. I prefer that. I have seen females wear their hair down and in a ponytail, and for me that just looks trashy. It looks unbecoming of a soldier, and I know that's crazy to hear now because I was one of those soldiers who sometimes I had a little rebellion streak in me when it came to some of the standards, like my bob, but I would have, but they would get on me all the time if it touched the bottom of my neck, and I understood why, but at the end of the day, I like when I looked at how I looked in my uniforms then versus now, I looked cleaner. I looked like an actual soldier, and I do think there is a particular uh, look that soldiers need to display. Um, and I do believe that needs to be of a neat and a clean appearance, strong, and in shape. No army is going to fear a fat army. No army will. No army will fear an army that doesn't even look well put together. Even when it came time to our marches and our execution of the left face, right face, or about face, it needs to be sharp. Okay, so and the reason why we have all these things is because you need people like this who know how to take orders when you're in the field, when you're downrange. You can't have people who are lollygagging, who don't have a pride in their appearance to actually handle and do the job correctly, especially in an environment where the atmosphere is a lot higher, the stakes are a lot higher. Life and death actually is a thing. So it's like he said, when these little things go away, all the big stuff go away. And I want to come back at the end of the day. I have always been an IT, a technical person. Sorry, where'd you do your MS? Fort. So I did my basic training in Fort Jackson, Relaxing Jackson, but I was 25 uniform. So my training was at Fort Gordon in Fort Gordon, Georgia. Um, I'm trying to think. It's trying to think of the city that I was there. That it's in. I think it starts with the A, but it's not too far from Savannah, Georgia. Savannah is probably like maybe 45 minutes. I think it's. I gotta think of it. But if you were to look at Fort Gordon, that's where I went to my training. That's where all the IT nerds go. Like pretty much all IT stuff is at that post, unless you're doing something related to military intelligence, I think, or maybe not. No, yeah. So the military, I think the military intelligence is in Fort Leonard Wood, but I think the military intelligence IT stuff is in Fort Gordon. Um, but like when I just think of like the military and how it should be presented, and then just going abroad myself and being in war zones, I'm sorry, but I think how an army looks, how an army exercises, how an army conducts their business and trade off is very vital, because it influences how they would react abroad. And if we have people in America, oh, you're fine, you're fine. But if we have people in America in our military who get offended easily, who are more worried about being a drag queen during their on hours instead of their off hours, I promise you that will not correlate to a strong military force abroad. It will not. Um, other countries will not see that. So it has more to do with how other countries see you. That optics matter, and liberals are. I think they live in a world where I think they believe we live in a world where every culture around the world has respect and honor. And I'm like, it's not that they don't. Um, it's not that they don't like an opinion, like as if it's an opinion. No, no, no. There are some that do not. There are countries in which they will never look at a woman as an authority figure. And in my opinion, in certain circumstances, as a female, I would say I would prefer a man. And I don't say this, to be on the side of men and blah blah blah. No, and to be opposite of women. No, I say this because I have been downrange. I have been there in the capacity of army personnel, and I have been downrange in the capacity of a civilian. And I'm sorry, I will 100% always want a man. I prefer a man to make sure that as one from a combat too, if we really really want to get there, I feel a lot more safer if I know combat is in the hands of men. And if someone's going to come and rescue me and it's something outside of a pilot just flying the plane, um, I expect there to be a man to help me, period. So, I don't mind females, and I actually promote females being in the military, but in the role of a support. Unfortunately, it's not. Uh, it's to say that some men are better at some things, as women are better at other things, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that we should allow men to embrace their true selves, and unfortunately, there are a lot of men who have a lot of anger. There are some women out there who do prefer to like beat up things, right? And I promise you, if they have the guts and the will, they could pass and be right there along the boys. And as far as like Pete Hegseth is saying, if there was a program back then where they had these same rules, I would gladly join, and I would accept it. That if I failed, it's because I was not up to par for it. But I was disappointed that those options wasn't available to me. But I think any female back then, um, when the army standards were a lot tougher, I don't see any woman who would have signed up for that program not being fully aware that of their ability to either a pass it, um, or be offended that if they didn't pass it, that they can't be in it. I think back then, the women who could pass it, they would have joined it. But unfortunately, that was not there for us. But the one thing that I would get voluntold for, because either I would place either first or second on um, my PT tests, or I would get 36. My average is either 36 or 37. I would say my average is 36 out of 40. Every single time I went to the range, sometimes I would get lucky and get 38 out of 40, but most of the time it would be my average is 36 out of 40. Um, um, I will always get voluntold whenever there is an event or a team building event where they need a female. And it absolutely made me mad because a lot of the females in our unit could not meet the standards to be competitive in a group with other guys, especially if it was like a mixed thing. So they will always choose the fastest girl. They if you were the slowest girl in your unit, they wouldn't even look at you. So they only looked at the top girls because they believed they had at least the same level of effort, or if not the mind, like the perseverance and the mind to keep going. So I would get keep going in order to win certain things. Like so, there would be like this, and then I'll go. There was like this 16-hour. There was like this 16-hour event between like all the units, and it was to win the trophy for the most fitted uh, unit. And we had to do things like it was an all night thing. So the march was a 12-mile road march, and we did it in 16 hours. But it was a 12-mile road march, and along the way we had all these different obstacles. Like we'll get like a live shooting. It kind of reminds me of your your last thing that you need to do in basic training in order to qualify. They have you do the 12-mile road march alone by yourself with your team, and then they do things. They'll be like oh, down, like let's say 3 miles in, there'll be a setup station and someone's playing um uh like how can I say this? Let's say you have some soldiers playing like let's say you have some soldiers playing like if they were a part of a unit that got hurt, and they're on the side of the road and they need help, and you have to give them you have to administer first aid, right? So then you get points off of it, how well you executed it. Like obviously you're going to secure the perimeter, and then your medics is going to go and they're going to do like a second chest wound. How would you fix this, right? Another test that we had to do would be like, okay, 4 miles on the road, you need to lay a claymore, like stuff like that. Another thing might be like down the road, uh, you might get hit with an ambush. Now you have to, figure out how to get yourself out of this ambush and detain the suspect or whatever. Neutralize the threat. That's what shit like that we would say. But this is all like army games, and we had to do that within a certain amount of time, and it was all for a trophy. So of course they only chose women who they believe could win. And I think the same thing should be said to for the women in these types of programs. The only women that should be a part of anything when it comes to combat roles are the ones who don't need the standards lowered. That's the only way I would, in any way, shape, or form, allow females to be a part of a combat role. Sorry. If anything, if you still want to be related to them in a certain way, you can be a supporting role in a combat role. I was very close to those two NPs and infantry, but unfortunately, I only dealt with their IT stuff, like in their vehicles. So if they needed anything, I was the person they went to, and they would, because I always gave them extra things. They always would bring me back stuff, like whether it be from the little market or some food. You have to be really careful with eating food coming from outside the wire and stuff like that. But they were always, because I always looked out for them, they always looked out for me. So I don't see women. I think in a way women they're better in support roles when it comes to this, and it has more to do with safety, has everything to do with readiness, and if shit hits the fan, you need fast thinkers. And men, by all my accounts, They're highly logical and highly stressful situations being in the military. And it's something that I've witnessed time and time again, and it's amazing. I'm not saying that women can't do that, but when life and death is in a balance, I do think men react way quicker and they're much more calmer. And um, um, I do think they have a better ability to get you home safety, to get you back home safety.
Announced the military's internal complaint and investigations process would be overhauled to eliminate frivolous complaining.
We are overhauling an Inspector General process, the IG, that has been weaponized, putting complainers, ideologues, and poor performers in the driver's seat. No more frivolous complaints, no more anonymous complaints, no more repeat complainants, no more smearing reputations, no more endless waiting, no more legal limbo, no more sidetracking careers, no more walking on eggshells.
Thank you.
Hegseth also defended several high-profile firings and ended by saying that if the changes bothered anyone in the room, they were free to leave. They should resign.
After Hegseth's speech, Trump took the stage where he called on his top generals to use American cities as training grounds for their troops and suggested that they should use violence against protesters.
We're under invasion from within.
That's extreme.
No different than a foreign enemy, but more difficult in many ways because they don't wear uniforms. I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military, because we're going into Chicago very soon. That's a big city with an incompetent governor. People are standing, their mouth is this far away from their mouth, and they're spitting at him, and they're screaming at him. And that soldier standing there, he wants to knock the hell out of the person, but he's not allowed to do anything.
Okay. Okay, well, that soldier that you saw, whoever he is, that is the composure of a good soldier. That's what he should be doing, especially here on city grounds, like in the city. Now, I did swear an oath to defend our country against enemies, both foreign and domestic, which also makes it really interesting to see. Well, I understand you can't why we don't have it in America where we label groups as terrorist groups. I get that, like, because then anyone could be a terrorist group, and you don't want, and that can literally change based off who's present. And I would hate that. That would be one quick way of you think a Holocaust won't happen? Oh, that would be one quick way to implement that. If you really, for the evil people out there, they would most definitely, use that. But I do believe when you have individuals in your country and even foreigners in your country who mingle with these individuals with a whole intent of bringing down your government, how do we handle that? Because I haven't really heard anyone tell me how we would handle people who are domestic, enemies. Like, like, what is what do soldiers do when there's a domestic enemy? Let's say if there's ever a civil war, some of those individuals that we would be fighting would be civilians. They would be domestic enemies. So it kind of like I'm pretty sure there's a way that they do handle domestic enemies. I just I think it's also I think it would be also done with in a different manner than how we do with international stuff. But I'm sorry for those. I do not condone using U.S. cities as training grounds. But again, I do think we need to deal with the enemy within, and it's in our oath to deal with these enemies. I just don't know the provision of how to deal with them. I don't think if the only way the military would get involved is if the law enforcement around us aren't doing their jobs. These people, these protesters who are spitting and doing all this stuff in people's face, this is harassment. They should be arrested. The law is not being enforced. The soldiers should not have stood there and taken all of that. But when you do not have law enforcement doing their jobs and enforcing the law, then you do end up with domestic enemies, and you need to deal with them. So, like, I agree, but not really. Yeah, I agree with not using the military against our own citizens. It seems like basic integrity. Yes, exactly. So there would not be a need for this with civilians if the police did their job, because that's what the police is for. They are there to enforce the law, and if the law has been broken, then they need to be arrested and put into jail. Um, Portland, you know, and I also get really irritated when people say this, with the police thing. They're like, well, we don't want to get involved, at least with Portland and a lot of these places. When we even look at the south side of Chicago, a lot of these police don't get involved due to the nature of the behaviors of people that live in those areas. My Those behaviors could be corrected if you enforce the law, okay, um, and if you made examples out of them. Um, but when you refuse to do that, what are we left? Who are we left to use? Should we just let those cities run amok with civilians? You literally, some of the civilians in there don't want that. You could be then having a problem where you have civilian on civilian crime, but the police won't be involved. The police are too scared to get involved because of the lawlessness. Or because not really the lawlessness, but because of the severity of it. And because of the severity of it, the police won't go into it, which leaves that neighborhood and the people there vulnerable. And because it has become a lawless community. What do you do in situations like that? For some reason, we can't seem to find a solution to that, but at the same time, we don't want to use our military. So should we just let those people in those parts of the city continue to deal with this? No, and especially if they're people of color. I thought we're supposed to listen to the people of color in America, right? So when you have them, these individuals, and a lot of these protests are happening. Oh, this is something else, but related to this whole train, but it's still related to the military. But like, I just keep thinking about the people who are going to be left at the mercy of these violent protesters. And a lot of them are happening in places where the population, um, is majority would be majority more liberal and people of color. That's the one, and that's another thing I think is interesting about the situation too. When it comes to these cities, a lot of these cities are already filled with people who are liberals, and they're attacking their own They're attacking their own liberal comrades, in their neighborhoods in order to push a certain agenda. So, in their attempts to push an agenda, they're hurting the very people that they're claiming to want to help. So you have people literally left at the mercy of criminals who are saying they're doing this on their behalf. I don't think that should stand. Well, then, I mean, then if that's the case, if that's the case, then, and the city doesn't want to do anything, and the governor doesn't want to do anything, then you have to use the military. I don't think the military should be used against civilians in any way, shape, or form. And a matter of fact, to be honest, if I'm, I think, because this has happened before, and I want to do a video about this where it was a long time ago, but there's a city in America in which the soldiers actually came back from World War II, and it was pretty much all ran by Democrats, and it was extremely corrupt. But it's something that we have forgotten in history. It was extremely corrupt. It was all ran by Democrats. The cops were Democrats, and like the town was mainly full of veterans, and they came back from war. Um, yeah, exactly. I don't know if there's a good answer to that problem, but this story that I'm about to tell you, and I will also make find the video on YouTube so you guys can watch it. But it talks about the history of this one town in America in which when the guys came back from the war, World War II. I'm sorry, not World War II. I think it might have been World War I. I gotta find it. Both won the wars, but they came back and they found that there was a whole bunch of corruption and the leadership, all the leadership, the police, the police officers, the police chief, the town mayor, everything. They were all corrupt, and the civilians had to rise up and use their guns to fight. Like the civilians there had to fight all the other civilians in the government that was running that little small town. They got no help. There was no National Guard. And to be honest, since the majority of the people that was there were soldiers fighting, they just came back from war. They probably didn't need the National Guard. But it was on it like it was put upon them. The soldiers took it upon themselves to straighten out their city because all the lawlessness that was mainly all the corruption that was happening, people not getting arrested when they should have been getting arrested for doing certain things to the community, well, to the civilians, and the police were not there at all. So, and I think it even started because the first person who ended up getting shot was, I think it was a black man. I think it was a black veteran, and he got shot, and then all of the veterans, I think all of the veterans ended up getting involved, and they ended up overthrowing that government. And now to this day, their government is the only government that's very different, and even how they hold elections, it is very different because of what happened with the corruption. But let me see if I can find the corrupt town in America in which soldiers had to get rid of the leadership. I know it's in the Midwest somewhere. Let's see if I can find after World War II. Yeah, yes, this one, the Battle of Athens. A lot of people have forgotten about this, but you had oppressed citizens, and no one could do anything. I'm a huge history buff too. I think because I'm a military person too, and I've always liked military history. I've always been a huge person of just history in general. But a lot of people don't know about this. This happened here in America after World War II. So this, when I think of what's happening in places like Portland or in cities that are just lawlessness, I think it's up to the people there to do something about it. Because I don't think the police is going to come to their rescue, like you said. Like city cops don't go where people don't give a fuck about the law. Always been that way as long as I've been alive. So like, but then again, a lot of these cities, the people there, they're so brainwashed to not even want to protect themselves. A lot of them don't even want to own guns. So like, it's like I mean, at this point, I don't really know. Pick the bad answer that works, I guess. I don't even know. I wouldn't know how to help the people there who are at the mercy of these crazy protesters. Oh, I didn't know about. Yeah, I'm telling you, there's like there's so much there's there's so much of our history that has been hidden from us, and even that I didn't even know that happened. That was never taught to me in history. You know how I came across that by accident? I came about this by accident just because I was trying to read. And I'm like, this happened after World War II? But then again, another reason why this will probably be suppressed too is because you have to understand the leadership during that time. It was all Democrats. All Democrats were involved. Not one single Republican was there that was involved with oppressing those people. So it's yeah, but yeah, it's wild. You should really look into that one. But I can't even believe that happened here on this in America. Like, that's crazy.
So they just stand there and they get abused. If it's okay with you, generals and admirals, I've taken that off. I say, they spit, we hit. Is that okay?
Of course, reaction was swift following Hegseth and Trump's speeches. Independent journalist Aaron Rupar calling Trump's speech a, quote, major escalation in a post on Blue Sky, writing, quote, hard to imagine.
When he knew, even when there were times, that he himself didn't, and he eventually would, told us, with everything with his wife, the drinking and all that. Like even in the military, we expect people to get in trouble, right? But there's always corrections for that behavior. We literally say you are unbecoming of a soldier. And we're back to no audio. How about now?
It was hard to
Don
watch.
Lemon is a
gem.
useless person.
It was.
No one cares about at all.
Well, he's doing pretty good. He's up 900,000 subscribers now on his birthday.
I don't know. Maybe is it audio back? Is audio's? Oh. Let me refresh. Okay. Drop frames. Oh. Okay.
And he's having a good time doing Parr, calling Trump's speech a, quote, major escalation in a post on Blue Sky, writing, quote, hard to imagine how anyone with a shred of dignity can keep railing against DEI in the military.
In his definition and the Trump administration's definition of diversity, equity, and inclusion, Pete Hegseth is a DEI hire. Pete Hegseth is not qualified for that position, and he shouldn't be in that position, so therefore it's very tough for...
He's having a good time doing it, and growing speech from Hegseth and Trump was incoherent, rambling, and not good
attacking,
enough.
saying
it
they
just
have
very
to be
much was a
objective,
condescending